is Charlie Young, who just finished at the University of Illinois and will go off to the Houston Astros. Then we have Ethan Moore, who's currently at Cal Poly, and then Christian Hook, who just finished at Northern Kentucky. So we'll get started by just simply introducing each one of us. And so we'll start with Charlie. Charlie, take the floor.
Hey, my name's Charlie Young. As Robert mentioned, I'm graduating tomorrow from the University of Illinois with a double major in computer science and astronomy and statistics, even though it sounds like three, first two are combined. And yeah, I'm going to work. I've worked for the Illinois baseball team for the better part of 3.5 years or so. Started off by myself with a flight scope and the coach's blessing, and then built it up to where we have 6 analysts working with me, and we're 2 of us are graduating, so there'll be 5 next year taking control. We do stuff from scouting to player development, all sorts of stuff, recruiting. So it's really taken off. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm start with the Astros team first, so I'm excited.
Hey, Ethan.
Yeah, my name's Ethan. I am in my 3rd year at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California. This would have been my 3rd year with the baseball team as well. We kind of started our program from nothing. When I showed up, there really wasn't a program, but last season we bought a Rapsodo and started working with that. And then in the most recent offseason, we invested in a TrackMan unit, which was really exciting. So our stadium's now equipped with TrackMan. And so our staff of managers has grown. I think we had 10 this season just because there was a lot of demand for data analysis, but also using analytics for scouting and, like Charlie said, some recruiting. So our program was built and then kind of is put on pause now, but we're excited about the future for sure.
And last but not least, Christian.
So my name is Christian Hook. I just graduated, I guess that would have been last weekend from Northern Kentucky University. I was a data science major, got a computer science minor along the way. That's kind of like a throw-in with the data science major. But I was with the program at NKU for 4 years, started as a freshman, and like Ethan, they didn't really have anything when I got there. No student manager base, just kind of from the start, we're building a relationship with the coaching staff, and then starting with just video. And I don't know if anybody's ever used iScore before, but it's like a really, really simple charting app on the iPad. Started with that, and then kind of built up, got a Rapsodo unit. And from there, was finally able to put together what I thought was a pretty cool charting applet myself. And then, of course, the season got shortened this year, so we weren't able to follow that through into conference play, but it was a really great 4 years working with the coaching staff and the players there. And the main focus for me, I think, was player development, and obviously having the charting app, getting in-game data that would have led to some more in-game practical applications. So thanks for having me, Robert.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess the first question that we're going to broach is, what was it like being kind of like, for you, Charlie and Ethan, kind of like this one-man show / very small group of people using these analytics in college baseball?
I guess I can start. So I got approached to work with the team the second semester of my freshman year. So I didn't really do too much during that season of 2017. But then coming into the fall of 2017, that off season is where I really started. And it was really interesting because the coaches, obviously they had the buy-in because they bought the machine without obviously consulting me or anything like that. So I came in with the buy-in already, but they kind of gave me the reins of, hey, we have this tool. We think it could be useful. We don't really know what we're looking out of it. Can you help us figure it out? So I said, for sure. So it was a lot of responsibility from the very beginning, going to practices and games, calibrating and setting it up, and then figuring out how to get the data, store it, and then put it into a format that can read it. So it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of communicating with the coaches. And it was really, I don't want to say it was like a full-time job, but pretty much every second I was spending away from homework and school was dedicated to figuring this stuff out. So I worked a lot, like I said, by myself for the first 2 years. And at the point where I in my junior year, I realized I'm going to graduate soon. So I think having a diverse group of opinions is better than just having like a single person controlling everything all the time. So I put out the hiring notice spring of 2018, but that spring of 2019. But that 2 years of working alone really taught me how to handle responsibility, because I had the coaching staff needed reports like pre-game every game of the season, so I had to make those. And it was honestly, it was pretty enjoyable to be around a baseball field all the time without, I mean, I didn't know any of the players going in, so being able to build those relationships was incredible. And it taught me a lot about just how to shoulder responsibility and be able to communicate my findings to coaches effectively, definitely.
Yeah, that's really cool, Charlie, to hear about how you had that support going in and that buy-in, because the coaching staff had already decided to kind of dive into this world of analytics before you got there. My experience was a little different. So when I showed up, I was like, okay, I've seen all these other kids at other colleges, helping their baseball teams improve, and that's something that I want to do. So I kind of showed up as a freshman in like November, kind of at the end of fall ball. I was just like, hey, how can I help? And, I wanted to be doing all this cool, drive line type, the sexy Twitter stuff. And they were like, okay, well, right now you can start by like painting the lines before the game. And I was like, nice. All right. That sounds like a good compromise. So I started doing that. And I did that most of my first year. And then at the end of the year, they bought this Rapsodo unit, and I was like, awesome. So I spent, a while trying to figure all that out. And it's kind of weird being the one guy who is trying to like bring analytics to a program, because everyone's just asking you all these questions. Like you're, Mike Petriello or something. And it's like, I'm a sophomore in college. Like, I don't know this stuff. I just read like 2 blogs on like what the Rapsodo dashboard is, and like, I'm still learning this stuff. But now all of a sudden you have a pitching staff asking you like, how do I improve my spin rate? And I'm just like, I don't really know. And, the more you say I don't know, the more it seems like you don't know what you're talking about, which is kind of brutal. So, over time I learned more to the point where, I could get asked a question that I didn't know, go research it, and then kind of bring it back to whoever asked and have, a somewhat interesting and helpful response. But yeah, so a big part for me, it was figuring out, in what direction should we go? Because analytics is so broad, especially in the college game. Like, do we want to use this for scouting? Do we want to use this for player development? Recruiting is kind of iffy because the data is not really there for that. But there's just plenty of directions you can go. So a big part for me was, in the last couple of years, has been figuring out what's the best use of my time. And now that we added the other managers, what's the best use of the other managers' time to help the team win. So that's kind of something that has been evolving for us.
Yeah, I wanted to add really quick, because that reminded me, I didn't just jump into like, okay, I'm doing full scale analytics like a major league organization. Like, one of the first things I did was every program charts on like a paper pitching chart, however you do it. And so I thought, I said, hey, what are you guys doing with that? And they're like, well, the coach glances at it and they all just stack up on his desk. So I was like, can you send me a picture of them whenever you finish? I was like, yeah. They're like, yeah, sure. So like during my CS lectures, I would just sit in the back and just enter this data into Excel, like, okay, ball, strike. And I would get like a whole play-by-play of like the entire game. And I sent it to the coach. This is before like I knew what he was looking for. I was like, hey, here's all this. And he's like, okay. And then like, nothing happened again. Cause I was like, I'm surely he wants all this data. I spent so long doing it. That was kind of a mistake to kind of throw it in like that. But yeah, not everyone starts off just doing full scale stuff. I put in hours that I could have been paying attention in class, but yeah.
Chris,
Yeah.
with you there.
Yeah, so for me, very similar. And I guess what Ethan said really stuck out to me is like when you're the one person coming in and whether you're a freshman, sophomore, whatever, it seems like you're coming in to start in quote unquote analytics department, and then you're expected to be this expert and have answers to a lot of questions you may not have the answers to. I don't think any of us claim to have all the answers, and obviously things are changing day by day with the rate of how things are progressing. But it's like, you come in and you're immediately held accountable, because if you say or give kind of like the wrong readout on something, that could really screw something up.
Absolutely.
And so like for me, coming in and kind of getting my feet wet with the coaching staff, that first of all, we didn't really have anything. I came in with a kind of like an order list of like, we should get these 3 cameras and an iPad, and that's about it. And so not from the get-go doing any really analytical stuff, just kind of more, hey, let's collect data and see what happens. I mean, coaches love video. It's like they wake up in the morning, they're like, video, I need to watch some video, whether it's on recruiting guys, like upcoming opponents, their own guys, they love video. And so to like, number one, get video for them was huge. Like they didn't have that. They were just looking at box scores or whatever was on the team website. And so and then, using the iPad to chart, we used iScored, but it shot up to some third-party app that's not even in existence anymore. Like they shut it down because I think we might have been the only people using it. And so like building that up and being there for those first 2 years where I was also growing in my technical abilities, the expectation wasn't from their end, hey, build us this like really, really cool tool or, analyze everything for us. It was more like, hey, I can get the trust, I can learn from these coaches and players, but I can also kind of build my own skill set up while doing that. And it was difficult because, like Charlie said, you're doing a lot of stuff. You're spending a lot of time that you should be spending on classes or, social life, you're spending most of your free time in the offices or on the field. And, thankfully for me, the coaching staff at NKU has always been like super hospitable. They've always been like a joy to be around. But, it still was a lot of work early on to kind of build the structure for what, now that I have experience in modeling and more advanced programming, background, I could start to put those pieces together on like what I kind of established those first 2 years where it was just like video and data collection, and then kind of move on like, hey, we can use this in-game data to then evaluate stuff on the Rapsodo unit that we got. I guess that was the end of my second year. And then from there, you can really kick off because most of the challenge is getting the data in the first place. And I know Ethan and Charlie have both struggled with that. I mean, it's great to have the flight scope and TrackMan, but like for NKU as like a smaller school, it's like, we don't have, like, unless you're sitting there pen and paper with a laptop to chart it, you're not getting anything. And so that kind of a lot of hours spent trying to figure out what the best moves would be to kind of build up. And I was pretty happy with, in my last few months, it was like, this is pretty cool. This is kind of what I envisioned doing. So it's cool to kind of see that through to fruition.
Yeah, I actually think this is a really good example of you can do college analytics no matter what kind of program your school has. Like we were fortunate enough to have, like, we're building a new facility that broke ground I think a couple weeks ago, and we got a new camera, and it's great. But like with Christian in a smaller school, you can still make the same impact with whatever you have. It's kind of what you make of it and how much time you put in. And it seems like for at least us three, it's worked out. So we've been pretty fortunate.
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of that idea where, like, be kind of adaptable and be in this scenario where, okay, well, maybe we don't have this right now. Maybe we'll get it later, but what can I do to best optimize what I'm given right now? And so there's so many ways you can do that and just, broach an idea, which then kind of leads me into that question. When you guys first started, like, what was some like research questions that you thought of from an analytics standpoint in college baseball, or something where you're like, okay, this might pique my interest. Let me dive deeper into it.
Yeah, I can start on that one. I've always been really interested since high school in like pitch sequencing and using your pitches as effectively as you can. So being in the Big West, the Big West is a conference that's kind of known for having not the best pitcher fastball velocity. So like when I showed up, we're a D1 program and we've, made the college worlds or made the, regionals fairly recently. But so, when I showed up, I was expecting everyone to be pumping 95, just like a major league team. So when everyone was throwing, 88 to 90 in the pen, I was like, okay, what's going on here? Maybe we can try to figure out how best to use these pitches so that, because it's like, I've never seen 88 get outs because I just watched Major League Baseball, at that time in my life. So, trying to understand how is the college game different? How are you going to be able to use the pitches that you have, which aren't as good as the ones that are on TV, to still get out. So that's something that I was interested in looking at since when I started, and really hadn't had the data to look at until fairly recently.
Yeah, I actually, you kind of stole my answer, because one of the things that we're working on, and I think is going to be a great project for the future, is to try to figure out how you can compare college stuff to pro stuff, and to try to, like you said, make inferences on like pitch sequencing or how they use their certain pitches. Because like if I wanted to make a comp that, let's say one of our guys throws 93, 94, which is upper echelon of most college baseball teams, then he won't get comped to like a Verlander or Garrett Cole or someone who actually throws gas in the major leagues. So it's kind of finding that medium between, okay, how do I raise the college talent pool to be able to comp to major leagues, or how do I lower the major league talent pool to comp to college, or like find that middle ground of like the upper college guys and the lower major league guys. It's a really interesting problem that I haven't seen very much literature written about how exactly you do that. And I think it's something that's pretty cutting edge right now. And I think that might be like the gold standard. If you can figure that out, you can make direct comps from college to pro. And that just opens so many doors, like to work with a pitching staff to try to make new pitches, see how to use it and things like that. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead,
one,
Ethan.
Yeah, one quick thing on that's interesting, Charlie, is that now that TrackMan's becoming more kind of ubiquitous, and it's in more stadiums, college stadiums, it will be interesting in like 5 years that those college guys will be able to use the TrackMan data from previous years to create comps there. So it's like, this guy in 5 years, his college performance is similar to this other college performance we've seen of a player who by that point might already be in the major league. So that's kind of an interesting evolution that we're just kind of waiting on.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that college analytics departments are missing is like that differs from major league departments is that projection system, because there's really I don't see a huge point in kind of projecting, because the best guys are out in 2 years anyway. But if you have TrackMan data from a guy freshman year of college all the way up to the minors and the pros, that would just be incredible to see his progression and how things correlate through the minors. And that's probably something that will get done. Probably like guys our age will be the first generation to have that happen. So that's crazy that we're on like the cutting edge of that kind of thing. That's never been done before.
Absolutely. And then it also kind of brings up the question, the various different talent pools, within conferences, within divisions. Because, the amount of talent that, someone who is pitching at Illinois against other Big Ten schools like Iowa, Indiana, so on and so forth, may be a lot different than someone pitching at Cal Poly facing, Cal State Fullerton or things along those lines. Or like Christian and I know, it's basically in the Horizon League between UIC and NKU. It's basically Wright State against everybody else in that sense, just because Wright State is basically like they should be in like a conference like the MAC because of just how much talent they have. So that's another kind of great idea to think of in terms of analytics, is saying, okay, well, how can we say, all right, this guy can pitch really well in this conference, but then can he pitch well in this conference? And does that mean he will pitch well going forward into the minors and majors?
Yeah, one thing that that comment reminded me of is the off season before my second year, I got very interested in calculating like college wins above replacement. And I was like, oh, WAR is just a formula, right? Like you can calculate that for anyone at any level, right? So I'm just like, okay, what's his WOBA? And, stop there, because it's like you can't use league linear weights on, in for our college calculation. So, we're working on getting college linear weights now, and you're doing some good work on that, Robert. So thank you very much. But yeah, so even there, it's like player evaluation in college is almost like non-starter. It's like you really do have to rely on scouting and the expertise of the coaches to figure out who's good, who's not good. There are some advanced scouting tools, but even just basic player evaluation. Like if you want to have a list of the best college players 1 to 2,000 or whatever, like it's almost impossible. The competition differences and all that, it's just like it's a crazy task. So
yeah, there's so much disparity, like, and I guess kind of looping back to what you guys were talking about, and Ethan at the start, you're talking about like evaluating sequencing on pitch types for guys, and going into it, coming in as a freshman working with a team, your immediate kind of thought is, oh, well, this guy comps out to oh, that looks a lot like so-and-so's pitch, or, maybe his slider looks like, I don't know. I haven't seen any Justin Verlander fastballs, but oh, it looks just like Verlander's fastball.
Yeah.
But it's so hard because the talent level is so, especially like obviously at the Power Five schools, they're a little bit more clumped together in terms of the talent level. But as you go down, there's more and more disparity even on a roster. And so like for me, one of the bigger things coming in was like, okay, we have these players in college. Obviously everyone here knows you can't really get rid of the players. They're there. They're on the staff. If they're on the roster to start the year, they're probably going to play at some point, and you can't trade them. You can't DFA them. They're there. So for me, it was like, how can we squeeze the most out of the guys on our own roster? And obviously that's so hard because you can't compare to major league equivalents because it's just not the same. It's not the same talent level. It's not, if this year our top guy maybe topped out at 90, that there's no major league team that does stuff like that. That's not comparable. And so like for me, it's like, okay, even having in-game data earlier on, going into, I think it would have been my second season, I was able to put together a report like, hey, based off of your tendencies, based off of like the swings guys took against you, you should throw your changeup 50% of the time, which is really, really high rate for a changeup. And this was a starting pitcher. And he was a guy that maybe topped out at 84. Like, he was a long guy, and I was like, I think like his changeup. So like I kind of put my neck out on the line and talked to him, and he was in on it. The coaching staff thankfully had my support for much of my 4 years there. And he went out and he got off to a really, really, really good start. And then, because of the talent level, it can only take you so far. So for us, it's like, you can put together scouting reports, you can do all these things, but at the end of the day, like there's a certain talent level that guys will need to perform on the field. And so, that's where it gets so tricky because you have these big ideas and like, you want to do all this really, really cool stuff, but it's still so hard to evaluate college players. And that's why, the best college coaches are really good at what they do because they can go, even amateur scouts, they can go and look at a high school player and they're like, I think he's going to perform. And then, if he goes and rakes, or maybe he goes and like shoves at whatever school he goes to, like, it's pretty hard to do because even at the high school level, talent disparity is even worse than that in college. So not kind of a non-answer, but it is just so difficult. I guess that's the root of everything for me. It's like, you have all these ideas, but at the end of the day, it's just difficult. It's a difficult thing. And so like for me, like the focus was always on player development. Like how can we get the guys on our staff better? Because they're going to be here all year. We might as well try to get something out of every guy. At least that was my perspective on it.
Christian, I had a question on
Yeah,
that.
go ahead.
So you said that he got him taking that advice of throwing the changeup more. That worked out really well at the beginning. Was there a limitation to that? Because it sounded like you were alluding to there being limitations in terms of talent and the level. Was that the direction that you were alluding to there? How did the second half go? What were the limitations that you found with that working at the college level?
Yeah. So we put together like a plan, which, that was my sophomore year. So the plan was based off of a major league player, and he had success. His name was Cesar Valdez, and he had a cup of coffee with the Blue Jays in the big leagues. And I guess it would have been 2017. Performed really well through a changeup a lot of the time. And looking at our pitchers in game data, was like, okay, this is a really similar matchup. Their deliveries are similar. Their pitch mixes kind of match up. Obviously scaled down for velocity. And he started off really well, like I said. But at a certain point, if he gets fatigued and then he starts throwing 80 miles an hour, if he can only take you so far. And so he would be really good for like 4 innings. But then as you progress through the season, and he's expected to go 6, maybe 7 innings per start, that's when it kind of starts to fall apart. So not necessarily it worked for a smaller sample size, but as I think in college that head coaches tend to like to see their starters go the distance as much as they can. College head coaches, at least in my experience, love starting pitchers that can go long. And so I feel like the desire for him to go further kind of stretched his talent level a little bit more so than it probably should have been. and led to, and for us, he had a really good year. Like comparatively, if you look at our pitching numbers, he's probably one of the better starters we've had over the last 4 years. But it did like started off hot, and then as the season progressed, arm fatigue, and then the velo drops, and then all of a sudden he went from throwing 84 to 82. That's where kind of the talent level is a pitfall, I guess.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up another kind of question or idea that I kind of want to approach as well. It's like, from an analytics standpoint, I'm curious to know, like, what are your guys' thoughts on kind of recruiting a pitching staff? Do you want kind of what Christian said earlier? Do you want guys who can, throw a bunch of innings, but maybe they don't have, maybe they have a more consistent of similar pitch types from inning 1 to inning 8? Or do you want guys that can shove for 4 or 5 innings, but then, start to struggle? So I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that end of kind of developing, or not necessarily developing, but like recruiting a pitching staff based upon whatever you identify as, good features.
I think it's tough when you try to recruit, especially pitchers coming out of high school, because I think it's kind of like how the best hitters usually play shortstop in high school. I'm guessing the best pitchers usually start and just shove in high school and just kill everybody. So I think getting a mix of guys can actually throw, like go the distance, getting a good mix of that, and then getting guys who can throw 3 or 4 and like piggybacking them. I think there's a good mix, and I think it also depends on your pitching coach, and he probably has experience in one way or another that he can probably tailor recruiting towards. But I think it really goes on a case-by-case basis, because, there are going to be guys like Max Meyer in Minnesota who can just absolutely shove for like 9 innings if he wants to, and that's that. But I think probably the most effective teams, the most effective pitching staffs get a mix of both guys who can shove for 8, and then also a good mix of kind of piggybacking off each other. It just depends on the pitching coach and the talent around him.
Yeah, at Cal Poly, I think from what I've observed, the recruiting strategy is just kind of like get the best arms that you can, and then just kind of have them all duke it out. And, almost every year that I've been here, there have been a couple of like rotation spots open and a couple of bullpen spots open. So it's kind of just like everyone go out there, all the new guys come out there, compete. Best guy gets the rotation spot, everyone else to the bullpen. Some guys aren't going to succeed at all, or they're going to transfer or whatever. So in my experience, the biggest, most important thing about recruiting pitchers is just having depth. This year we actually, when the season was just about to start, we had this kind of weird thing go on with injuries and transfers. And we ended up with I think it was 11 pitchers on our staff, which is crazy low. So we were really if the season would have played out, it would have been very interesting to see how the pitching staff would have held up. And that wasn't really, I don't think that was anyone's fault, but it just kind of highlights the need for pitching depth and then just kind of figure out everyone's roles a little bit later.
Yeah, I would say kind of what Charlie alluded to is like the best pitchers you're going to pick up were starters in high school. That's just kind of how it shakes out. And so at least for NKU, there's being a smaller D1 program, you're expected to compete at the D1 level, but then there's also a limited recruiting class that, that hasn't been picked up already by bigger schools. And so you kind of go back. It's like, okay, you've kind of got this level of like, oh, maybe these guys aren't quite D1 caliber, but you have to give them an opportunity. So if you want someone who throws hard, he might not throw as many strikes as you like. And if you want someone who throws strikes, he might not throw as hard as you want. And so I think for me, it was like seeing kind of how they balance that. So like, hey, if we've got, 3 guys that are really good stuff wise, but, might have a 6 walk per night. I know that's not the most advanced metric that I could assess that with, but like they're going to walk a lot of guys, and then maybe you want some guys that maybe don't have the best stuff, but the ball will be put in play, and good things happen when the ball's put in play, bad things happen when the ball's put in play. But for me, it was like what I saw when we were at our best at performing in conference. My freshman year, we won 20 some games, maybe 25 games on the season, which is as a newer D1 program, that's not bad. That success came when we had our best pitchers kind of go in those shorter spurts, kind of like as Robert mentioned. It was like when we had, our best guys maybe not have one closer who only comes in for the ninth. We'd have our closer going every day on a weekend. It's almost like set up like how you might see an MLB team operate in the postseason, because it's kind of win at all costs. You've got this roster, you've got a week in between, kind of like a 5 days of rest or 4 days of rest in between games, depending on your midweek schedule and whatnot. So you can kind of go all out, and so you can obviously, keeping in mind guys' health. I think it's easy to go too far in the deep end with and using guys repetitive days. But I mean, Robert mentioned UIC. They're a rarity where they had a really, really good starting rotation, and then they had 3 guys, and they do 7, 8, 9 in the ball game. Like they'd give up 2 runs every game, and they had a really great defense. We were talking before this call started, like about the field play is really small, but that works out for them. I think depending on where we, like at NKU, the ball flies. Like if you put the ball in play to left field, this is not a advanced metric, but it was like ball will fly out. It's like home run haven. So
drag.
getting yeah. I mean, it is unreal. Like there are days that we had a game against Xavier where I think it was 25-18 football scores, and so you get guys that put balls in play, the balls are going to be put in play out of the park. So it's so difficult. But for me, it's like getting guys that can miss bats, and kind of having your best guys out there as much as they can, as much as they can pitch. I think that was kind of when we were at our best. That was the strategy going. We have one guy that kind of, or 3 guys we can ride and try to get 2 wins on a weekend was usually the goal.
I think Ethan made a really good point about kind of you throw everyone at the wall and guys will just shake out. I think you can go on top of that, maybe things that maybe the analytics crowd might not talk about all that much is, I think especially in college when you're recruiting 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, that you need to know their character, because some guys just won't make it in college ball. And that's actually a big part of recruiting pitchers, especially because when especially pitchers, when guys have a lot of load on their shoulders for a college game and maybe a big situation, some guys just can't do it. And there have been instances in the last 4 years at Illinois where some guys come in and it just doesn't work out. And they were talented, sure, but they just couldn't handle the pro game or the college game. So I think obviously getting good arms and missing bats is probably the most important thing, but just right under that is having this kind of mentality where you can handle defeat, because it will happen, and try to just have a good confidence, because I think that's just needed in college baseball. I mean, pretty much at any level of baseball, but especially college, and especially on a pitcher with that much workload all the time. So,
yeah, great points, Charlie. Christian, is it true that NKU invented the closer in college baseball? And by closer, I mean opener.
Yeah. So at the end of this season, literally the last weekend. So I had been kind of vouching to our pitching coach, who I got really close with over the 4 years. I'm like, hey, like we can get really creative with how we deploy a staff, because like I said, kind of win at all costs. And this year our staff, I'll be frank, we did not win a game this season. It was really unfortunate, but we did not get an opportunity to win a game. I definitely don't think the talent level was winless. And I think we were turning a corner just as everything was put on hold. But that's the huge caveat to everything. That, and also kind of goes back, this, you can put together, not to say I'm a smart person, but you can put together a smart group of people that are doing the right things, and sometimes the results still don't come, which is unfortunate. You can do all the right things and it still won't happen. But yeah, so at the end of the year, we kind of had to get creative with our staff, because we had a mix of different looks. We had a sidearm guy who hadn't pitched in a few years, and then we had a tall, lanky JUCO guy who might throw a little bit, might not throw as hard as advertised. He was throwing about 77 to 78. So, and then we had some starters that were actually, at the end of the season, our starters were performing well. So the thought was, instead of letting our starters go 6 innings and then having a mixed bag with the bullpen, we could instead try to flip the game and have, maybe not quite an opener, but a set of openers. So we would play matchups earlier on when it's easier to kind of feel the pace of the game. And instead of letting things get out of hand early, try to shut it down. And we did this against Dayton, and it worked fairly well that weekend. We didn't come away with a win, but like some of our best pitching that are this season. And then the starter would come in at a set time in the fourth inning. And then the hope would be after that, we could bring in our best reliever to finish the game. And so I was really excited to start seeing it in conference play, because, for us, it was about making it the most and squeezing the most out of the guys we had to a reasonable extent. And, I didn't even bring up the idea this year. Our head coach brought it up, which was really cool to see. And we also, our assistants put together like a four-man outfield this year too. So it was like, we were definitely moving at a progressive rate.
Yeah, that's really
but
cool.
Like I said, you can do all those things and it could still not turn out as well as you'd hope, which is unfortunate, but that's how the game is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Noah Kronbar has a question. How did you guys develop KPIs for hitting, key performance indicators, for hitting, pitching, and defensive data? Was it following things done in MLB, doing your own research, or building off coaches' knowledge / did you find the KPIs at the college level are different from other levels?
I could start. We didn't really have much of an organizational focus on KPIs. I think that in our case, it was just kind of like the guys who are performing and the guys who we know and who we expect to be good are going to be the guys we put on the field. And like, we can't, like Charlie or like Christian was saying earlier, like we can't really trade for guys or like call anyone up from the minors, like the best 9 players are on the field most of the time. So for hitting, like adjustments were definitely being made by the coaching staff. And for pitching, it's like, we're going to try to figure out, how we can get guys out. But in terms of like evaluating performance, that just wasn't really something that we were doing very often, because it's just like at this level, at least for us, we kind of just like know who's doing well and who's not doing well. So I don't know. It's just that simple. So it's probably a bad answer, but sorry.
Yeah, I thought we were kind of, the Illinois program was kind of alone in that thinking, where we don't necessarily know if it's worth our time to put numbers to players, because like when major league organizations do that, they're either trading or drafting or cutting, which all 3 of them we can't do. So I think there's so many ideas that we have on how to do that, and those things will look really good on resumes, specifically to like get in the door to major league front offices, because at the end of the day, that's kind of what they're looking for. At least that's one thing they're looking for. So we had some ideas, we tried it out, but we'd always get sidetracked, like, hey, the pitching coach wants this, we like have to move away from it. So it was never something we like consistently did, but I think one of the key areas that could be useful is like at a high school showcase or something, where you have this black box model where you say, okay, we just had a showcase, we had a workout at our college, we have this Rapsodo hitting or pitching data, let's throw it into this model and it spits out a number. Like that would be incredible to give the staff, hey, here's our best estimate of this guy's talent given all of the experience. That would be something that would be incredible. I think it could be worked towards, but it just didn't really fit our schedule, unfortunately. So
Yeah, awesome. And then I guess to build off that question that answer from Charlie is kind of walk us through each of your guys' is kind of like the basis of your guys' reports. I know like towards the end, something came out at Illinois. One of the student managers did it. It was called SEAM, which I found pretty interesting. And then Christian did something similar with something called Maverick. So yeah, feel free to expand upon kind of like what your kind of reports are in that sense.
Yeah, well, SEAM was a thing that we literally published today on Archive. That was a separate research project I had going with some staff professors, so that didn't have anything to do with the Illinois program. That's using MLB data, which is interesting. You should check it out. But with our reports at Illinois, it kind of separated into like a player development aspect. Like, okay, we have all this data, we have goals we want our pitchers to meet. How can we give the pitching staff and pitching coach updates on if and when they will meet their goals? How is their progress? It's kind of just keeping up to date, like bi-weekly, saying, hey, this guy is his velocity's here, he's been on this trend, like if he wants to get here, here's what we'd recommend, that kind of thing. Same thing with hitting, just a lot of goal setting and goal meeting. That was kind of the big thing at Illinois that we instituted in the last year, just trying to figure out where our guys are and then where they want to be and trying to kind of make that transition. But then on the scouting side, we are fortunate enough to have synergy in bats. So we had a lot of video we could watch. So we had a couple of people working on like weekly reports for the coaching staff. And then we scrape data online to make opposition scouting reports. So we do that. So it was a pretty big operation running towards the end. And I really wish we had a full season to try out all those moving parts because everyone's working on something different every week. But yeah, I think the main takeaway from what kind of reports we make is really tailored to the coaching staff we have. And I've been working with them for 4 years. So I pretty much know what they're looking for and I know what they like. So we could tailor that to kind of evaluate current talent and then try to make a path to then reach their goals and their future talent. So it kind of worked out like that.
Yeah, and for me, like I said before, my main focus I felt like was player development because I think Ethan mentioned it earlier. It was like you only have so much time to spend on this, and you only have so many resources. So you want to make sure that you are spending in the right way, and you could put your hands in lots of different projects and make an impact there. But for me, it was like I really think that the most benefit I could give is through helping out with player development. So that's when I put together Maverick a few years ago, and it's basically a Shiny app. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Shiny, but it's a package within R that makes making a really nice looking web app really easy. I think, and it's not all easy, but it's a really cool package if you haven't had an opportunity to check it out. But basically, it would pull in all of our Rapsodo data from Rapsodo sessions, and then also some core NCAA data. Now, obviously, Robert and Bill Petty have done some work on that, making that really easy. But when I put that together, I'm not even sure if Baseball R had that capability to pull in NCAA data. And so, I put together, kind of learned how to use Python by putting together a really rinky-dink scraping project. And I was actually, the whole core behind it was Charlie led me onto it because he put together that really cool, I don't know if you guys have a specific name for it, the Illinois Sabermetrics Project website.
Yeah, that was a personal project, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, but I remember checking it out and like immediately messaging Charlie on Twitter. I was like, hey, how do you do something that cool? Like, and then thankfully he didn't give me all the answers and kind of led me down the right path without showing his hand, rightfully so. And so I was able to kind of put that together for our use over the summer. And so it kind of pulls in Rapsodo data, NCAA data, and the idea was that there's like a main hub that you can go in after a Rapsodo session and see, movement plots, averages, stuff coaches like to see, stuff players would like to see, and then also a link to a YouTube playlist where you could watch. I would go through and manually make little videos with my iPhone slow-mo camera and edit those. And I thought those turned out pretty well visually. And I think they were also helpful for the guys. And then you could go through different sections and check out like movement plots, spin direction plots, and then like there's also like a customizable plot that's like Brooks Baseball, and like you can see trends and whatnot over time. And for me, it was like I said, player development was the focus. My first year, I did help out with scouting reports when we had that quality in-game data, but then we had 2 years of that, and then 1 year where we used this one app that I won't even plug its name because it was really terrible. And then this year, I had my own app that I was using, and I never really got to the point where we were going to compile that data for scouting reports, which is unfortunate. But I guess first year helped on scouting reports, kind of used hot cold zones, tendencies, spray chart. We get spray charts from Diamond Charts. I know that there are a lot of different companies that use that data. I think that's just scraped data from NCAA. But I also helped out with defensive positioning. So I would go through and kind of scan over different opponents. That would have been awesome if I could put together like an automated script that would go through. But it was a time sensitive thing. So I wanted to make sure I could do it manually. But yeah. So the main reporting software was Maverick, which really helped out. I think it was really cool to be able to go through and show guys especially after a Rapsodo session, hey, here's what it looked like. And at that time, Rapsodo didn't have a very nice website for reporting data. And so since they've made adjustments to mixed review, but at the time, I was like, I want to make sure that this is presentable to the coaching staff and the players. And I think what I put together was pretty cool, and I was excited to put it together for the coaching staff.
How'd you come up with the name? Unless I'm missing something with NKU.
So yeah, we are the Norse, but we've had our head team manager's name is Ryan Mavriplis, and his nickname is Maverick, and he's an individual with Down syndrome, and he's been with the program for 10 years, and he is like the best ever. Like, he's on every road trip. I've roomed with him several times. I've shared a bed with him on the road. Also, he has a really cool nickname. So it kind of stuck. I'm like, this is cool, like a way to kind of honor him and then also have a really cool name. So it kind of matched up pretty well there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So then I guess it brings up then this question. Ethan has had experience with TrackMan. He's had a TrackMan database. Charlie has flight scope data, and then Christian has done a lot with Rapsodo. So kind of walk us through, like, what are some like advantages to using that software? What are some disadvantages? And kind of talk us through, okay, if a coach were to get one of these softwares, assuming they have the budget to do so, either, broach it or maybe not broach it, or, go for it, maybe not go for it, but kind of just talk about some of the cool features about it from an analytics standpoint.
I think I might take this one first. I've used FlightScope for the better part of 4 years, and I can tell you that it's not very accurate. I'm just going to be blunt about it because I've been really upset about it over the course of 4 years. And to this point, I've told FlightScope this. We've emailed multiple. Peter can probably talk at length about this too. We've emailed multiple, probably like a dozen colleges, and every single one of them say they have problems with it. I think it's like $15,000, give or take. So it's pretty expensive right off the bat. But I mean, the movement metrics are incorrect. Release points are incorrect. Spin axis is never right. So I really would recommend going in a different direction than FlightScope. You see Peter shaking his head or nodding because he agrees. I would assume, but yeah, it's just been tough. I mean, it gets stuff like velocity and spin rate, and things like that. I see someone in the chat also says FlightScope has issues. I think they jumped in too early because they started in golf like TrackMan did, and they made a baseball recording unit, and then we had really good support the first year. Like they flew out, they demoed it. It was there's another one in the chat. And they had great support right off the bat, and then we kind of like I work with Alan Nathan, and we kind of sat down and wanted to validate this data because he would know more than anyone if stuff's right or not. So like sophomore me coming into his office saying, "Hey, I have all this data. Let's look at it." And he just goes, "This is not good." And I was like, "Really?" And then I look at it and I go, "Oh, wow, yeah, that is really not good." So luckily, we are fortunate enough to have a Rapsodo that we now use. We have an Edgertronic camera to kind of back up that Rapsodo data. But yeah, I would steer clear of FlightScope until they make some big update, which I don't even know if will happen. So sorry for the scathing review, but I just wanted to be honest.
I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah,
might have another scathing review if it's allowed. So using the Rapsodo, I think we jumped in fairly early, and I remember vaguely we called one of our alumni is Nate Jones, and we called Nate, and he was generous enough to give us money to get there at Rapsodo. So it was like everyone's jumping, like we were jumping on beds in the hotel room because me and the pitching coach were so excited. They were like, "Yes, this is going to be awesome." We got it, and first step, learning how to use it. There's a bit of a learning curve, especially that would have been 2018, I believe. So that was like not ahead of everybody, but that was fairly early in the adoption process, especially in college baseball. And so we were really excited to get to use it, and then not having a lot of resources out there for it. Then I had to learn a lot of it on my own. And when we first got it, it worked really, really, really well. And I think especially using the dashboard on the iPad works great in the middle of pitch design sessions, especially using a camera and conjunction with that works great. I think for me, where a lot of the issues I have with Rapsodo lie are after the session. So getting the data off of Rapsodo's website. So they've changed a lot of it. I used a different method to get data before that has since not been there. And I think it's been difficult. And talking to the folks at Iowa, I know they've had a hard time with Rapsodo as well at times. And so, it is what it is. I think it's really expensive to get your data to me. All these companies have one goal in common, and obviously being, they have to make money. And so, you buy an expensive unit, and then without really knowing, you have to pay thousands of dollars to not only use your product, but also have your data. And I think, especially for smaller schools, that's really tough because, maybe you have enough money to get the system, but you don't have enough to keep it rolling for a while. And so that's where I've been frustrated. And then, like I said, their website wasn't very good to start with. And then their newest update, I have a hard time with it. I don't know if that's just our subscription or if there's just something wrong with me, but I've had a really hard time with their website. And I'm sure hardworking people, not trying to diss their work, but it is frustrating. And then on top of that, we have a Rapsodo 1 unit. We don't have the ground unit. So it's the one that goes on the pole. And so it stopped working this winter. It just wouldn't function. And I reached out to Rapsodo personally, and I was like, hey, our unit's not working. It's turning on and calibrating, but it's not picking up any pitches. What's wrong? And they're like, well, it's outdated. You should probably upgrade it. If I feel like if I emailed Apple that my phone stopped turning on, they would not tell me to just get the new one. I don't know. That's just me. And like I said, I know there are a lot of hardworking people at Rapsodo, and I'm not here to diss on the product. I just want to be honest. But yeah, so I've had my frustration with it. I know a lot of people have loved it, and when it works, it's awesome. Like, it's really, really cool, and it's been a game changer in our program. But like I said, I just want to be forthcoming. It's just be like, there are problems. I have not used the ground unit. All of those problems may have been fixed in terms of and on top of all those things, I still question the accuracy at times. We would get, especially as our stopped working, we were getting misreads all the time, especially on movement, and the ball would be, it was doing some weird stuff. So I don't know if that was just our unit. But definitely at the end of I guess kind of poetically at the end of my years at NKU, our Rapsodo stopped working. So that's my review. I think it's great, but I do have a lot of qualms with it.
Yeah, we had the ground unit, or we have the ground unit for the pitching one, and what our pitching coach came to me. He's like, hey, we're getting 100% spin efficiency on all of our guys, and I was like, I mean, okay, I don't even think pro teams get that kind of result, but for sure, let me take a look. And every single pitch was 99 and above. And I was like, I love our pitching staff, but seeing consistently 99 and 100, 40 times in a row, I'm like, there's no way that's accurate. Mm-hmm. And so we've had a little bit of inflated spin efficiency metrics. I tried to work with Alan to kind of ratify that. We've kind of found that to be true, but we're still working on it. But that's probably the biggest thing from the ground unit that I've noticed so far.
Yeah, and I know Driveline set up a partnership with them recently, and so I would think that through that partnership, they would be doing some data validation, maybe some kind of back end stuff to make it a little bit easier to comprehend. But I feel like that's why there was a big chunk of me that wanted to make that shiny dashboard on my own. I was like, the coaching staff is not going to understand if they have to use kind of what's built in. That's just my perspective.
Yeah, we've so we had the Rapsodo 1 and then the Rapsodo 2. The Rapsodo 2 I think is a little bit more easy to use and more reliable than the first one, but that doesn't fix the fact that the website's brutal and that you have to pay a bunch of money to obtain a CSV. So not very useful information. But I mean, in the month or so that I had access to TrackMan data, it was very helpful. The one thing that is kind of the downside of TrackMan is that it can only be used during games because it's just a big unit that sits and it points right at your mound. So, you can only use it when guys are throwing off the mound. But the data, I mean, that's, as far as I know, TrackMan's probably the gold standard for data quality in, the price range of what colleges are able to afford. So, I mean, if the question is, should a college team invest in a TrackMan unit or a Rapsodo? I think that it really depends on your goals and what you're trying to achieve. And And I think that that's going to vary from university to university. So I wouldn't say that like everyone should invest the, $50,000 or whatever it is to get a TrackMan unit, or, any investment in technology. It's not just like a blanket statement. I think it really depends on what you're looking to do.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of being a college kind of analyst and starting your own thing and working with college programs is that a lot of this data, unlike stuff you work with in class, is going to be really messy, and you're going to not know why it's wrong half the time. And that's something you just don't learn in a class. Like at Illinois, if I was in a data science class, like 200 kids, we would get like squeaky clean data all the time, because the professors, rightfully so, they want to be able to grade homework really fast because there's so many kids. But working with this kind of data, whether it be Rapsodo, FlightScope, Edgertronic Video, or TrackMan, there's always going to be little quirks that will really do you well to like work out and know. So when if you eventually go in and work in pro ball and you see that same kind of thing, you'll be like, oh, I know exactly what that is. I know how to fix it. You can help your coworkers. It's really as much as you would want perfect data, that's just not going to happen. It's something that at least us three, we've learned really quickly, but that's just something I think everyone's just got to get used to.
Yep, there's no iris data set for NCAA.
Right.
There you go.
There's no sepal length and sepal width.
Yeah.
It's just perfect.
I wish.
So then we'll have a couple more like college related questions, and then we'll answer kind of final thoughts questions. But who is someone in your experience, maybe not even from an analytics standpoint, but someone that you saw in college that was like, wow, this guy is really good, and you were kind of like blown away by how surprisingly good said person was?
I will never forget seeing Brent Spillane hit a home run over our scoreboard at Illinois Field. It was just unbelievable that someone can slug 900 or 600, whatever he did. I don't even know what it was. It was the high. I think he slugged highest in the country. He had like 25 homers. Like we were going back and looking at like average exit velocity and launch angle for a model we were building. And I forgot to filter by like current players. We just had everyone in our data pool, and his average exit velocity was like 105 from the games we recorded with him. And it wasn't even like 2 balls; it was like 10 or 15 because we recorded at SBU. And he had like a 4 home run game. I think the next day his bat got tested to like see what the heck's going on, because he just hit dinger after dinger after dinger, and it was just unbelievable to see a dude hit that many home runs at that pace. It was like I couldn't even believe my eyes when I looked down at the flight scope and see like 115. I'm like, Aaron Judge like hits that. I didn't think anyone else could even do that. So I think seeing him come out and put on a show when every single game he played was just crazy.
Yeah, I'll start my story by letting you guys know that our ballpark is notorious for being very not necessarily pitcher friendly, but like not hitter friendly, especially during night games. This was a Friday night, and we're pretty close to the coast. Think like AT&T Park, or I guess Oracle Park now, in San Francisco. So just very fly balls just tend to die. And on this particular night, our Friday night starter, this was last season, decided to groove a changeup right down the middle. I believe it was on 3-0 to Cal's Andrew Vaughn. And
I've heard of him.
We haven't. We luckily we had bats running, so we had 4 angles. And I still keep the video in my phone because it's so fun to watch. That ball disappeared. I think when we found it, it was like in the middle of campus. It was insane.
For me, I guess somebody that's on our team, his name is Griffin Dorshing. He won the college home run derby last season, I guess last summer, and he's always a slow starter, but like once we get to conference, he mashes. But his batting practice displays are incredible, and he's about 6'5". His last name is Dorshing. He's about as wide as a door, like all muscle, and he hits nukes. Like the ball goes so far, and like he'll miss hit balls, and he'll be cursing out of the cage, and like it'll be like or out of the turtle, and it'll be like halfway up the hill, and like whoa man, like it's like serious man strength. And then I guess this season we played Troy early on, and a pitcher named Levi Thomas. I had to look him up over to the side here, and he went, I think, 5 innings against us, and then he struck out 14. something along that line. So every out but one was a strikeout, and that was a batter's interference. That was the other out. Like, it was one of the most dominant starts I've seen. And coming down, it was opening night for the season, and we hadn't faced anybody outside yet because it's pretty cold in the winter here. And we go down, we play Troy, everyone's excited. And then it was a massacre. And he was pretty good, and he'll probably get drafted, but it was impressive. It was like he was just coming at guys with fastballs. And it was pretty impressive to watch.
Yeah, I didn't travel, but we played A&M, and Asa Lacy started against us, and we actually came out with the win. But my goodness, seeing him on the mound, how just the presence he had, like, which I don't even know how he could even step within 20 feet of the box, coming up against like 95 from a lefty of like 6'4" or whatever. It's just crazy.
Yeah. So then I guess I have two guys in my 1 year at Iowa. But first, let me mention Brent Spillane did have a slugging percentage of .903.
There you go.
90, not OPS, slugging, just slugging. .903. That's insane. But one guy when I was at Iowa for a year, it was Jake Adams, and he was kind of like Brent Spillane before Brent Spillane came along. Just this big power hitter. I think he had like 27 home runs in about 60 games with Iowa. So he was the home run leader, and I mean, he could mash balls all across the park. But the other guy from my time at UIC was Wright State's Peyton Burdick.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, like I remember seeing Ethan's TrackMan database, and then I was looking at like the top exit velocities. I'm like, there's Peyton Burdick. Oh, there's Peyton Burdick again. And yeah, because I remember, I was telling Christian this earlier, like as soon as it hits 5 o'clock at Curtis Granderson Stadium in Chicago, Illinois, like the wind just changes direction, goes in. So they were playing a night game that time, and I mean it was like 45 degrees, cold, windy city, so on and so forth. Peyton Burdick goes up there and just lines a shot, like it was just like out of a cannon, and it didn't even reach. I mean, it had probably one of the smallest apexes you'll ever see, but I mean, it just shot out like a cannon and just dead center, gone. I mean, it was like maybe no more than 10 feet off the ground. So I was like, this guy can hit.
Yeah, Wright State had him and Seth Gray, and they both went, I want to say they're both top 5 rounders last year. And then they had, so those guys were there like 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. And then they had everyone else would steal about 100 bases a year. So you had this threat on the bases, and you knew that they were going to run at some point. And then you also had Peyton Burdick. It was like, well, okay, if we want to get a chance to get this guy stealing, you got to throw a fastball. Well, guess what Peyton Burdick does? He just mashes balls 5,000 feet. So it was really difficult playing them. I did feel bad for our coaching staff that they had to kind of work their way through those games, because it was like, okay, well, we could walk this guy and then he can steal a base, and then Burdick's up and then he'll hit a double, and then, it just stuff escalates after that.
Yeah. So then my last college question for you guys is, for those who want to get into, becoming a student manager or getting into analytics, what kind of advice would you leave those people?
I would say you really have to demonstrate that you're interested in the program. A lot of people want to do this job, and a lot of people will try to do it, put on their resume that they're a student analyst at whatever college, and they will apply to like all 30 teams with that on the resume. But you won't really be successful if you're just doing it for the resume. You really have to go in. You got to put in. I'm not going to say hustle culture, because I don't really agree with killing yourself 24/7 to do a project. You should be happy and have a social life and stuff. But you should really put in as much time as you can to really grow as not only help your team win, but just grow yourself as an analyst. Like I made a bunch of individual projects. I'm friends with the team. I'm friends with the coaches. I go to all the practices, all the games. I just really make myself present so the coaching staff knows that I care about the team, and I'm not just trying to get a check mark and put it on my resume. So knowing the team, knowing the coaches, because at the end of the day, you're just a student in college that wants a job in baseball, and there are probably thousands of those around the country. So if you make yourself stand out by just the effort you put in, I mean, it's works for us, and I really think that I know it's a cliche that hard work pays off, but I mean, it's been evident, especially in my case, that you really put in the effort and do something with the team that kind of is bigger than yourself, and it'll really pay off. I guess that's my one piece of advice.
Yeah, I'll tack onto that. I think that working for a college team as a student it's kind of more about the journey of being a part of that team and being able to help the team than the destination of just being like working for the team, you know. So when we were hiring or looking to hire some students to add to our team, a lot of students were interested in like, okay, I just want to say that I work for the team, you know, maybe clock in, clock out, but it's really not that kind of job. And I don't think that working in pro baseball is really that kind of job either, where you can just kind of show up and leave. It's kind of all encompassing. So yeah, like Charlie said, I just want to echo just being there, you know, making sure you're working on the right things and making sure that the stuff that you're doing is helpful. But yeah, just kind of be in it for the right reasons. And you really do have to be passionate about it to, I don't know, to be able to maintain those kind of hours and work as hard as the job requires. But if you are willing to do that, then I think, you know, you have a good shot of succeeding and learning a lot. And, you know, you won't really have to worry about your resume because the resume will just kind of build itself. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was really cool because obviously you're building up your skill set while you're in school. You're learning these things in classes, and then you're also learning some stuff on the side with baseball. And along with that is you get to build these relationships with the coaches and the players. And for me, I was really grateful to get really, really close with the coaching staff at Northern. We had, for the most part, the same staff throughout my 4 years. And it was, you know, getting to know those guys and then learning from them along the way, because they obviously have years and years of baseball experience that I don't have. And so obviously you're picking up analytical skills, technical skills along the way, but getting to know the baseball side and like the interpersonal side is really important as well. And like for me, most of my time outside of class on campus was either up on the field or in their offices. That was where most of my free time was spent. And so like, and it, not always productive, sometimes less than productive. And so, you know, it's building the relationship with the coaches first and foremost, whether it's like obviously coming on campus as a freshman, send them an email, maybe drop by their office. I haven't encountered a college baseball coach that like, I guess some people might beg to differ, but you know, in my experience, most of them are pretty approachable. Like they're good guys for the most part. So having the opportunity to talk to them and kind of get to know them has been really cool, but you really do have to put in the work. In my case, it's like a lot of what I do is kind of self-driven. So if I don't like push myself to do something, well, the coaches aren't really asking or clamoring for information because they don't really know exactly what I can do yet, especially those first 2 years. So until you really prove yourself, you're kind of pushing yourself on that path because a lot of colleges that don't have these things set up or these programs set up, they're not going to know what to expect. So you have to kind of show them what to expect. You have to show, like, kind of meet their needs. You can kind of just like try a bunch of different stuff and then see what buttons you're pressing that work out, maybe don't work out, and go down a bunch of different paths. And then from there, you kind of start to build kind of a program. And I was thankful enough to have another student to help me. His name's Ben Walker, the last 2 years. And he, like, incredibly hardworking individual. I mean, you have to be willing to go and travel and sacrifice school hours, personal hours, you know, when you're on the road. And then we had thankfully we were on spring break, but we were coming back from University of Alabama. This was 2 years ago. Our bus broke down 4 hours from home. We had to stay the night in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And then we got up at like 6 a.m., came back home, and it's like the bus is shut down. Like you might be late for your class in the morning. Like there's some crazy stuff that can happen. And that's also part of the experience. I think it's more, for me, it was way more than a resume builder. It was a way to be involved on campus and then also make a lot of probably lifelong friends, whether it be with players or coaches. So it's really enriching beyond just kind of being able to put it on your resume. I think that's, for all of us, that's secondary. So not to get too sentimental, but like for sure, it's less about the resume and more about kind of everything that goes on in that role.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of a quick story about travel. I underloaded. Obviously, I'm a senior and I'm about to graduate, so I underloaded this semester because I could afford to. I took credits early in my college career where I could just take one class, and I wanted to travel with the team as much as I could. The coaches were on board. I traveled to the first two series, which I don't remember where they were, but they were by bus. But one of them was by plane. So we left Illinois Field at like 11 a.m. To get to O'Hare. I think our flight was at like 5 or something. So we got there with plenty of time. And I think it was early March, late February. I think it was a series before everything kind of shut down. So we got to O'Hare like 2 p.m. I think our flight was in 2 hours. And I was talking to the guys, hey, what do we, like, has a flight ever gotten delayed before? Because it started kind of raining and snowing. And they were like, yeah, one time a couple years ago, it's never been canceled. It's only been delayed once. And we like just drove back and played at SLU. I wish Noah were here, but he left. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Great, whatever. So we were just sitting there. Flight got pushed back to like 6. We're like, okay, it's like 2-hour delay. Like that sucks, whatever. So we were just sitting there doing nothing. And flight got pushed back to 10. We're like, okay, we've been here for 5 hours, going on 6. This is great. Got pushed back to 11:30. And they said, this is the absolute last flight. Are you going to take it or not? And so the coach said yes, because we had to play. So we all got on the plane, probably wheels up at like 11:45 at night. And we were flying to Charlotte. So we jumped an hour ahead when we landed. But we flew into Charlotte because we were playing at Wake Forest. So we had to drive from Charlotte to Wake's campus, and that took like an hour and a half. So we eventually got to the hotel at like 5 a.m. And luckily they moved the game back. But it was my first ever like big trip with the team. And I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. Even if we were at the O'Hare for 9 hours, it was so fun just sitting there with the guys and just enjoying it. So it might seem like it sucked, which I guess killing time and being bored at a airport would be the bad part, but hanging out with the guys and having them ask me questions and talking to the coaching staff, it just felt like it didn't even feel like work or boring. It was just sitting there having fun. So I know it's kind of sad that me and Christian college career kind of ended soon and kind of on a sour note with not being able to play out the season, but really take advantage if you're going to do this. And I know players say play every game like it's your last, but I mean, I had one home game this season, and I wish I kind of soaked it in more than I did. So really going to the field and talking to the coaches and players was like the best part of this job, and I guess relish it if you're going to go forward with that.
Awesome. Yeah, this is really awesome stuff. So we'll end on Peter's question, and he's just asking, what are your guys' thoughts on the transition you'll have working in pro ball? What are you most excited for? And what are some good routes in landing a job in pro ball?
I guess I can start. I'm really looking forward to starting in a couple weeks. I worked with Baltimore 2 summers ago in Baltimore. Then I worked with Houston for 8 weeks this past summer, and I'm starting there full time in June. And I'm really looking forward to just getting around the other people I work with. They're some of the smartest people I've ever met. Like funny, we're already like really good friends. Just it's a great atmosphere in that front office. And when we were in college, we were in class and still working, but then we were also doing baseball on top of that. And I always thought when I was in my lower level, like C class, I was like, this really sucks. Can I just go out to the field and get there 4 hours early and just hang around? Now I guess working in pro ball, your whole job is doing that. So it's just like, it sounds like a dream come true when you can go to, like, I can go to Minute Maid and just sit there for a little bit before I go into work or something like that, and just kind of enjoy it and really realize that the stuff I've been doing outside of class for the last 4 years that I've loved the most about college is going to be my full-time job in like 2 weeks. And I just think about that every day, that it's such a blessing, and I'm really lucky to have to say that. So I guess if I could give one piece of advice to kind of tailor not a resume, but just to get yourself ready to go into pro ball, it's really make yourself stand out in any way that you can, because there are thousands of students that want to work in pro ball, and that's been like that for a while. And we're kind of some of the first college age kids that are making the jump from like getting a BA or BS to going and working in an R&D department, because most of the people have like gotten PhDs and worked in the industry and came in. So this is the first couple of years where people are starting to trickle in from the bachelor's. So make yourself stand out. In my case, that was building that website that Christian mentioned earlier. Just giving yourself something unique where you can go to an interview and they ask you what you did in college, and you said, oh, actually I did this. And you can point to it and say, it took me like 100 hours, or I don't know how long it took, but it took me this many hours. I was really dedicated. Here's why I think it's good. And really talking yourself up with this 1 or 2 really unique things, because at the end of the day, they have a stack of resumes like this tall, and they're just going to filter through until they see something interesting. And if you can present that to them, like first and foremost, when you get an interview, it's
probably a really, really good idea. And it's worked for me just to have that one thing where you can really talk yourself up and be confident, because at the end of the day, there are just so many people that want to do this that you have to make yourself stand out.
Yeah, I want to add to that. So Charlie, you made a lot of good points there. First, I'll say that I do not work for a team and have not worked for a team, but I have had some success in the interview process with teams. So I think that there's a lot of emphasis on kind of having your resume stand out and getting that resume look for the first time, which is obviously very important. But I think what's also important is being able to kind of back it up. So, you could definitely you could kind of have an eye-popping resume and it's like, oh, he's done all these cool things. But from kind of what I've gathered, it's really important to show that you are going to do a good job at the job that they're hiring you to do. So I spent my first probably 2 years of college just kind of reaching out to everyone and anyone who worked in baseball and saying, like, what is your job and what would it take to do your job well? And then I've spent, at the time everyone's saying, learn R, learn SQL, learn Python. And I'm like, well, at the time I'm an 18-year-old high school senior. I've never taken a computer science class in my life, right? Or it's like, really be able to understand baseball at a, as if you're a coach. And it's like, okay, well, I don't have that either. So I'd say it's just like, figure out what job you want to do, figure out, what the people who do that job are doing every day, and then try to emulate that. So for example, for a more specific example, something that I'm really interested in is doing like long-term research for an MLB team. So I know a lot of teams they use analytics for like trades and acquisitions and player evaluation. And that's all interesting, but I am more interested in kind of doing like long-term research, kind of finding new stuff that maybe people haven't ever thought about. And if I want to get hired by a team to do that kind of stuff, I feel like I need to be doing that kind of stuff now and putting my stuff out there, failing, learning, and improving, so that when it comes time that, this all opens up again, it's like, all right, I've shown that I can do the job that I want to do, so now it's going to be easier to hire me. So I think that if you're a college manager, you should probably just figure out what parts of the game do you like the best, what parts of the game would you like to be doing full time. I know a lot of guys who are in our shoes working with colleges. There's this kind of whole new thing in the minor leagues that's like a tech, like kind of a technical intern, someone who's familiar with the college game, familiar with working with players and interpreting data for coaches and players who may not be well versed in data. So that's a whole opportunity. So I would just say kind of set goals and try to achieve those goals, in addition to having your resume stand out.
Yeah, and like Ethan, I can't speak to in-office experience. I had a position lined up with the Tigers within their R&D department pre-COVID-19, and then obviously with a lot of things on hold, that also got put on hold. So that's unfortunate, but obviously with the amount of tragedy going on, that's inconsequential. But for me, feeling that success and seeing that success through the interview process, one of the bigger things for me was, and I know Peter was there, but Saber Seminar in the summer, I don't think there'll probably be, I think Saber Seminar was already canceled this year. And Ethan was there. He was actually my roommate that weekend. But for me, that was really good because I'm naturally not one to sell myself. I don't have like some people have like an elevator pitch. I don't have that. That's not where my brain goes to immediately. And so that weekend, you're kind of stress test to meet like 100 different people, a lot of which work for teams. And you're kind of like come up with this pitch in your head. You're like, I'm Christian. I do X, Y, Z. Here's what I want to do. Here's how I'm going to do it. And it really helps you, I guess, with self-evaluation and then also like kind of interview style speaking skills. A lot of the people that work for teams are more relaxed than a normal corporate setting, but there are some interviews that are a little bit more formal, I find, in that process. But like, and I guess for me, it was like going to NKU, which is not known as a premier academic establishment. And that's not a knock on the faculty there, because I think they're excellent. But going to a school that hasn't really produced people that go on and work in bigger industries like baseball. For me, what I did, I would have to do things. I knew going into it that I would have to do things to stand out, and really specializing my skills on the side through work with the team, but also through personal projects and other internships during the school year. And I think being able to specialize, because not everybody goes to a Harvard or a Yale or, upper echelon. Ethan, your comment's funny. Upper echelon academic institutions. And so for me, it was like, okay, teams will want to hire those folks because they have, whether it be a PhD, obviously not in our age range, but they have that kind of academic pedigree, and a lot of time teams want that kind of academic background. And so going to schools that aren't notorious for those types of things, you really have to work harder to get your name out there. And obviously, I think I think Charlie was the first one to really put his stuff out there that I remember. And there might have been others before. I know Matt Cain had an article written about him. I don't know him personally, but I know Ethan does. But
I agree. Charlie was my inspiration when I started.
Yeah. Charlie's like the grandfather here.
I think
for him, like, not many people put stuff out there. And so for me, even if your work isn't good, teams want to see your work. That whether you feel like less than when sharing it, or you're like, oh, well, it's not as good as something Charlie put out there, so I can't put it out there. Like everyone's got to start somewhere, and teams desperately want to see the work. Because I think when I went through the interview process with teams this year, not once was I asked. Most times you have to go through a ringer process where they send you 100 questionnaires, and you have to do them in 3 days or else. But for me, it was like I didn't have to do that this year because I had a sizable kind of background on what I can do. And so when teams can see, like, whether it be coding experience, whether it be experience with pitch design stuff, you have to have something concrete that you can show them, and so that will make your resume stand out. So whether it's a link to a GitHub or link to a Shiny app, it's just not necessarily one big thing, but it can be lots of little things that I think help you stand out. And I think at the end of the day, you have to be really willing to work in this industry. And right now is really a time of uncertainty for, I'm sure, everyone that wants to work in baseball and everyone that does work within baseball. I'm not sure like what the hiring patterns will look like this winter, next year. Not to be depressing, but it might change for a little bit here. And so obviously your skills that you would use as a student manager, student analyst aren't just for baseball. Like, they will work. My experience with the team at NKU helped me get another internship last fall that I'm currently still in. It's been great. And the hard work and like your experience in interpersonal relationships won't go unnoticed regardless. And so I know your work might be specialized for baseball. I know I simply just don't find other topics as interesting as I might find baseball topics, but the work won't go unnoticed even if baseball is on hold, or if hiring processes are on hold. So yeah, I just think you do have to outwork everybody else at the end of the day, and sometimes you have to get lucky too. There's luck involved, and then there's hard work. I mean, I think most of the folks in this are very smart individuals, and they're hardworking individuals, and I think that's a good start. But unfortunately, there are only so many positions, and so it's kind of like it's difficult. It's a really difficult process, but and it can feel you leaving defeated. I remember 2 years ago, I went through the process, and I got deep in the process with multiple teams. I didn't get anything. Like there was nothing, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what do I have to do to like land a spot? And a lot of teams won't hire people that aren't graduated yet. I know Ethan had something lined up this summer, and that's an exception, and Charlie was an exception as well. But if you are not a senior and you can't it's a touchy thing, and it's very difficult to land a spot. And so any spot is it's awesome. Like, so, whether it be a player development spot and maybe your goal is R&D, you can still work within an organization. Like, the work doesn't stop. And obviously I can't speak from experience, but from my perspective, the work won't stop once you reach a team, especially because most of our goals aren't just to be an intern. But yeah, I know I kind of talk in circles now, but it's kind of
I know we probably want to wrap up soon, but just really quickly, after following that whole grandfather thing, by the way, thank you. Yeah, I think speaking specifically what Ethan said about wanting to like finding a job you want to do and then doing that thing. I went to Sabre Seminar, and this was right after I built my website because I wanted to be a software developer in some sense. That was a CS major coming in. So I built this website and I went up to a bunch of people that like a bunch of front office employees at Sabre Seminar. And I straight up told them, hey, I built this website and it's better than the NCAA website. And that's why I built it, because I think it's better. So there has to be some level of confidence to what you do, because at the end of the day, they don't know what you did or why you did it. So I went up to them and said, hey, this is better than what most other people use. And they're like, wow, I mean, okay. And so they all went and looked at it and hopefully they agreed. But I showed it to a bunch of employees, and one of them said, hey, we're looking to like build out our website. This could be a great application of your work. And so it kind of worked out like that, where I wanted to be a software developer in baseball. I identified like Ethan said, and worked towards kind of building that tool set, and it worked out to a T exactly how Ethan recommended. So it's a great way I never really thought of to kind of identify where you want to be and kind of tailor your skill set to that. It might not always work out, like Christian was talking about, where that job just might not be open. But I think at the end of the day, you have to kind of be happy with any job you get in baseball. If this is something you really want to do, it could be a video intern, it could be in player development, R&D. Just starting somewhere. There's a lot of, I think, room for upward movement in baseball, since people are going to different teams, people are retiring, just a bunch of different moving parts. So even if it's not the job you want or the job you tailor your skill set to, I think starting just somewhere and getting experience in baseball is just invaluable.
I listened to a really cool interview the other day. It was with Daniel Adler, who's the head of the Twins baseball operations department, I believe. And they were talking about their hiring practices, and he pretty much straight up said, like, we send out this project, and if the project is good enough, like, we will hire that person. And it's kind of nice. I think a lot of teams are like that, and it's nice to think about the hiring process as kind of being in your control only. It's like, you're not just looking for a spot to open up. It's like, if you do work that's better than the work that a team is doing, like, they will hire you. It's really that simple. So I don't know if that kind of helps anyone, but I like to think of that in my head and be like, it's up to me. If I'm not hired yet, then my work's not good enough yet,
I think putting that work out, especially on something like LinkedIn or Twitter, helps out immensely. I like most of my connections that I used in the interview process were from LinkedIn, and I remember making fun of LinkedIn before, and I'm like, it's like, business majors, like, all very formal, and there is an element to that, but it helped me land a position. So it was like, this is really helpful. So like we'll continue to put stuff on LinkedIn because it gets in the eyes of teams. People, teams have like chats, and I'm sure they have lots of processes involved that like they're kind of scoping out people. So you want to make sure you stand out, and it's not always during the interview process. A lot of teams might reach out to you before they're hiring people, and it might lead to conversations down the road. So it's like, pimp your stuff out. You have to.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. I just didn't think of the right word. There you go.
Awesome. So yeah, really appreciate you guys coming on. We'll wrap this up. Again, like big thanks to Charlie, Ethan, and Christian for coming on, and hope you guys learned a lot out of it. And stay safe out there and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
Yep.